It was the kind of job most people wouldn't look twice at. Buried on a faded bulletin board in the back of a thrift shop, printed in bold, grainy letters, "One night watch, old chapel on Briar Hollow, $1,000 cash, must stay until sunrise, no questions asked." I laughed when I first saw it. It felt like bait in a horror movie, the kind of trap where you scream at the character not to go, even though you know they will. But I wasn't in a movie. I was behind on rent, hadn't eaten properly in 2 days, and didn't have enough gas money to even leave town. The number on the flyer connected me to a voice. Calm, emotionless, male, said to meet at the chapel by 7 p.m., sharp. That was it. No name, no further instruction. The church was a stone husk tucked behind a crumbling cemetery off Briar Hollow Road. Overgrown trees loomed above it, their limbs stretching like claws across the cracked bell tower. Vines coiled through shattered stained glass windows, and an iron gate groaned as I pushed it open. I felt watched the moment I stepped onto the property, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. A man in a gray trench coat stood by the front doors. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Deep-set eyes, skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, fingers that twitched slightly when he handed me the envelope. "Payment's inside. You get the rest if you last the night." I raised an eyebrow. "Last?" He didn't answer, just nodded toward the entrance and turned away. I caught the heavy slam of a car door and the sputter of a distant engine as I stepped inside. The chapel's interior was swallowed in dust and shadow. Rows of decaying pews faced a stone altar where a crooked crucifix still clung to the wall. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, louder than they should have been, like the building was amplifying them. The air was cold and dry, not like a drafty ruin, more like a tomb sealed too long. I found the note on the altar. It wasn't there when I entered. I'm sure of that. It looked like parchment, yellowed and brittle, folded 3 times and tied with a thin red string. To whom it concerns, the church remembers. The church listens. If you wish to survive the night, obey the following. And below it, scrawled in uneven ink, were 7 rules. 1. Do not sit in the 3rd pew from the back on the left side. He waits there. 2. If the pipe organ plays by itself, lie flat on the floor and cover your ears. Do not rise until the final note ends. 3. Between midnight and 1:11 a.m., you may hear your mother's voice. She is not here. Do not speak back. 4. If the stained glass glows blue, do not look at the altar. Cover your eyes until the light fades. 5. Should you see a girl in a white dress praying by the front, do not interrupt her. Do not approach. She notices kindness. 6. At 3 a.m., the confessional may open. If it does, sit and listen. Say nothing. Leave when the booth goes silent. 7. Do not stay past sunrise. The church does not like goodbyes. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. It was insane. Every part of it screamed prank, or at least that's what I told myself. But something about the air shifted after I unfolded that paper. The pews groaned as if disturbed. The candle stubs on the altar flickered to life without a spark. And somewhere far above me, I heard a single, heavy note from the pipe organ, a low, droning sound that sank into my spine like an anchor. I grabbed my duffel bag and flashlight and moved to the rear of the church, choosing a pew carefully, nowhere near the cursed one. I sat down and told myself this was easy money. Just a night, nothing more. But as the sun dipped low behind the stained glass, casting fractured beams of crimson across the walls, I heard something new. A whisper, faint, fickle. It came from inside the walls. and it was saying my name. For the first hour, I did nothing but sit still, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline, trying to slow my breathing. I kept glancing at the note. The 7 rules burned behind my eyelids, each one more absurd than the last. But the whispers, they were real, and the air had weight to it now, like the very walls of the church were pressing in, curious and slow. Outside, the last light vanished, plunging the world beyond the chapel's cracked windows into a shapeless void. There were no stars, no moon, just darkness. And inside, the glow from the dusty candles on the altar flickered without wind. They shouldn't have even been lit. I stayed in my chosen pew near the back, careful to count twice and make sure I wasn't anywhere near the 3rd pew on the left. Rule 1. That was the first rule I'd memorized. He waits there. It sounded like madness, like some leftover line from a haunted house script. But my eyes kept drifting to that row, 5 seats ahead and across the aisle. It looked no different than the others. Cracked varnish, warped wood, a family of cobwebs collecting dust. But something about it was wrong. I kept feeling like I was forgetting something, like I had missed a detail. At 10:47 p.m., my flashlight flickered. Not just a dimming. It sputtered, like a dying match being drowned in fog. And then the temperature dropped. I could see my breath puffing in the beam. My teeth started to chatter. It wasn't just cold, it was old. The kind of chill you find in grave soil and sealed tombs. That's when the pew creaked. Not mine, not one of the dozens scattered around the chapel. His. The 3rd pew on the left groaned like someone had just settled into it. My entire body locked up. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare turn my head. The creak was too specific, too slow and deliberate. I sat frozen, ears straining in the dark, heart thudding loud enough to drown out the whispers that had started up again. They weren't clear at first, just a rustle behind stone. But then they took shape. Words, faint and breathy, echoing from within the walls. Sit, sit, sit. No, no way. It couldn't be. Join me. The voice was dry, genderless, a paper-thin rasp like it came from an unused throat. My flashlight flickered again, just enough for me to glance sideways. The 3rd pew now had a shadow. Not just darkness, a silhouette. A figure sat there, hunched slightly, facing forward like it had been there all along. I pressed myself back into the seat, trying to disappear into the wood. My fingers gripped the flashlight until my knuckles went white. The candlelight up front sputtered, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls. The silhouette in the pew didn't move, but I could feel it watching me, even without eyes, even without a face. There was a presence to it, something ancient and wrong, like it wasn't just a ghost or a trick of light, but something the church had swallowed whole and now kept caged within splinters and stone. The whispers changed. They got louder, more urgent. Closer. Come closer. It's warm here. I shut my eyes, tight. My body screamed to run, but I didn't move. I remembered the rule. Do not sit in the 3rd pew from the back on the left side. He waits there. No matter how badly the whispers pulled, I stayed still. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the presence vanished. The pew groaned again, lighter this time, like someone standing up. The whispering stopped. The room was still. I opened my eyes. The pew was empty. My breath returned in slow, shallow sips. The flashlight buzzed back to life on its own, its beam steady now. The candles no longer flickered. I felt my limbs again, though they trembled uncontrollably. I had followed the first rule, and I was still here. but my nerves were frayed, and it was only 11:12 p.m. I glanced back at the folded parchment in my coat pocket, and a terrible thought struck me. What if the rules don't just protect you? What if they provoke the things waiting here? By the time the cracked face of my watch ticked over to midnight, the air inside the chapel had settled into something worse than cold. It was hollow, like the building had exhaled everything living and was now just waiting, empty and expectant. My heartbeat felt too loud, every breath echoed. Then came the pipe organ, one note, deep, trembling, pressed from keys I knew hadn't worked in years. It shuddered through the stone walls, vibrating the very bones of the church. The pews groaned as if the note woke something sleeping beneath them. It wasn't music, it was a call. My flashlight cut out again, and that was when I remembered Rule 2. If the pipe organ plays by itself, lie flat on the floor and cover your ears. Do not rise until the final note ends. I didn't hesitate. I dropped. The wood of the aisle was freezing beneath me. My palms slapped the dust as I flattened out, turning my face toward the cold tile and pressing both hands over my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then the music began in full. The first note was low, almost like a breath, but then others followed, sharp, warped, discordant, like the organ wasn't playing a hymn but unraveling one. The chords staggered, off-tempo and lurching, as if played by fingers that didn't understand how sound should behave. Each note scraped across my nerves like rusted nails. I tightened my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't traveling through the air. It was crawling under it, sliding through the seams of the chapel, slipping into cracks in the walls, into the marrow of the pews, and into me. I gritted my teeth. Seconds passed, then minutes, or maybe longer. It was hard to tell time when the world was reduced to vibrating bones and a single rule: don't get up. The melody twisted, a scream hidden in a chord, a whisper layered into the hum. Somewhere above me, the rafters groaned. Something heavy moved, and then a footstep on the floor beside me. I didn't look, didn't breathe. The footsteps circled slowly, measured, like something was curious, testing. Its pace was almost polite, a deliberate hush in every step. I felt it near my head, then my side, then back near my feet. A circle again and again. Then the organ hit one long, final note. It was sharper this time, like metal shearing through glass. And then, silence. It stopped. The room exhaled. The tension pulled back, like a tide retreating just before a wave. I didn't move, not until my ears caught the quiet hum of something else. It wasn't music now, it was keys, metal on metal. A ring of keys being turned in a lock that wasn't there. I peeked, just a sliver, just enough to make sure the footsteps were gone, and I saw the pipe organ. It stood perfectly still in the back of the chapel, massive and ancient, its pipes climbing high toward the blackened ceiling. No dust on the keys, no cobwebs, not anymore. But there was something behind it. A door that hadn't been there before, not built into the wall, not hidden in stone. It was the wall, until now, slightly ajar, a thin crack in the mortar, and from within I saw movement, like fingers withdrawn behind stone. I scrambled upright, hands trembling, and backed away from the rear of the church. No more music, no more footsteps, but the door remained open, and the feeling that something had stepped closer lingered. I returned to my pew and sat stiffly, eyes fixed on the pipe organ and the strange black line beside it. I didn't need the rules to tell me not to open that door. I knew better. Whatever had played the organ, it wasn't done watching me. and I was only 2 rules in. The stillness after the pipe organ's performance was worse than the noise. It wasn't calm, it was anticipation. Like the church had finished clearing its throat and now it was waiting for me to answer back. I didn't. I sat frozen, eyes darting from the altar to the cracked windows to the pipe organ's new door, still ajar. But it was quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, just the sound of time grinding forward. Then the candle flames on the altar shifted. They didn't flicker or dim. They turned blue for a split second, icy and unnatural, before returning to normal. I froze, because I remembered Rule 4. If the stained glass glows blue, do not look at the altar. Cover your eyes until the light fades. But that wasn't now. That rule hadn't come into play yet. Rule 3 had, and I knew it as soon as I heard her. "Daniel?" The voice was soft, fragile, laced with the warmth of someone who hadn't spoken my name in years. Because she hadn't. Because she was dead. I turned toward the sound before I could stop myself. The voice came from the front doors, echoing down the aisle like she'd just stepped inside, arms wrapped in her old cardigan, the scent of gardenia perfume trailing behind her. "Daniel, sweetheart, are you here?" My body turned cold. I squeezed my eyes shut. I knew better. Between midnight and 1:11 a.m., you may hear your mother's voice. She is not here. Do not speak back. But I had nearly answered her. It didn't feel wrong. It felt comforting. That's how it tricks you. I slid down from the pew, pressing my back against it as the voice drew closer. Soft footsteps on rotted wood. I covered my ears. It didn't help. She spoke inside me now. "Daniel, you shouldn't have come here." I bit my lip hard enough to draw blood. My hand reached into my coat pocket and gripped the note again like a talisman. I didn't dare open my eyes. Not yet. She circled the pews slowly, her footsteps not matching her voice. Too heavy, too sharp. Something wherein her voice didn't know how her feet used to sound. I heard her sit in a pew ahead of me. 2 rows up, maybe 3. Close enough. "I'm cold," she whispered. The wind pushed through the chapel then, not outside, but from inside. A warm current that moved past me toward the altar. It carried her scent, exactly as I remembered it. And then another voice joined hers, deeper, male, my father's. "Son," he said, his voice cracked with that old familiar strain, the one he had near the end when the cancer hollowed out his lungs. No, this wasn't real. They are not here. "Come sit with us." The bench creaked. Not one person. Now, 2. "Daniel," she whispered again, "it's okay now. Just come home." I rocked back against the pew, hands pressed tight against my ears, my legs drawn to my chest. "Don't look. Don't speak." My throat itched with words I couldn't say. Every syllable they spoke was a memory, pulled from the softest years of my life. My mother's lullaby, my father's laugh, the smell of burnt toast on Sunday mornings. They weren't talking, they were digging, mining everything I loved and twisting it, and then the voices turned cold, flat, almost angry. "Daniel," I kept still, "you always were the difficult one." A third voice joined them now, something distorted, not a person, a rasp layered with static. "Turn around," it hissed. "You're making this harder than it has to be." The lights overhead buzzed, flickered, then blinked out for a moment. Then silence. Not the regular kind, the kind where even the insects forget to breathe. I opened one eye, slowly, peeking just above the pew. Nothing. No one in the pews, no shadows, no scent. The altar was still, the organ untouched, the door behind it closed. But the note in my hand felt wet. I looked down. The parchment was damp, edges stained in faint gray like it had soaked in fog. I unfolded it, breath shallow. The rules hadn't changed, but at the bottom, something new had been scrawled in jagged red ink. You almost broke it. One more mistake and they'll take your name. My pulse spiked. I refolded the note with shaking fingers and backed against the wall where I could see every angle, every pew, every shadow. I was still alive. I hadn't spoken, but the church was learning what I loved, and it would use it again. I didn't move from the wall for what felt like an hour. The candlelight cast uneven shapes across the chapel, long, stretching shadows that swayed when nothing moved. I kept one hand on the note and the other on the flashlight, which still sputtered like it was breathing its last. The church had gone quiet again, that deceptive, loaded silence. It always came right after the horror, like the building was watching to see if I would exhale too soon. I didn't, because something had changed in the air. It was warmer now, heavier, like breath after a scream. I looked toward the altar, and that's when I saw her. At first, I thought she was a statue, still and faint in the blue haze filtering through the stained glass above. A small figure kneeling at the very front of the chapel. Her white dress glowed like it had been painted in frost. She was praying, head bowed, hands clasped tightly, lips moving in silent rhythm. Rule 5. Should you see a girl in a white dress praying by the front, do not interrupt her. Do not approach. She notices kindness. I should have felt scared, but I didn't. That was the worst part. Looking at her, I felt safe, the way a child does when they see a nurse at the foot of their hospital bed, like someone had arrived who would make everything okay. That's what the church wanted. I gripped the pew beside me to anchor myself. My instincts told me to move, to get away. But a deeper part of me, the part that still ached from hearing my mother's voice, wanted to walk up and sit beside the girl, to ask if she was cold, to ask if she was okay. And that's exactly why I stayed rooted to the spot. The girl's head lifted slightly, just enough for me to see the outline of her cheek. She wasn't breathing, not even the subtle rise and fall of a body at rest. And her fingers, folded neatly in prayer, were too long. The bones stretched unnaturally beneath translucent skin, as if her hands were stitched together from too many places. Still, she kept praying. Still, that faint blue light wrapped around her like a spotlight. Then she paused, stopped mid-chant, and turned her head slightly, not to me, to the side aisle. I followed her gaze. Slowly. There was nothing there, just the shadow of the pulpit and a cluster of fallen hymnals. But her attention stayed fixed. She tilted her head again, and I swear, I heard something whispering where she was looking, just a flutter of breath, like something invisible was speaking back. I leaned forward instinctively, and her head snapped toward me. I froze, not because she was looking, because her face didn't move with her. Her head turned, but her face stayed facing forward. Her neck twisted like a screw, turning her head further and further until her mouth, still locked in silent prayer, faced the rear of the chapel. Her body never moved. Only when her face caught up with her head did she blink. Once, slowly. I ducked behind the pew before I could see what came next. And then, the candles went out. All of them. The chapel dropped into darkness so sudden it felt manufactured, like a hand had covered the entire building. I lay flat on the floor again. I didn't need a rule this time, because I could hear her walking. The soft drag of bare feet across the stone, the occasional tap of a toe against a pew leg. the uneven rhythm of something that didn't quite know how to walk like a girl, but was trying to. I shut my eyes tight. The silence dragged on. Then she stopped, right behind me. I could feel it, her presence pressing into the base of my spine like ice. She inhaled and spoke in a voice that didn't belong to a child. "You looked." I didn't answer, didn't breathe, didn't move. After what felt like forever, the pressure lifted. The steps began again, this time in reverse, padding gently back toward the altar. The candles relit on their own. The blue glow was gone, and so was the girl. I climbed shakily back into my pew, pulse galloping through my veins, throat dry as ash. Rule 5 had been a trap. Kindness had a cost in this place, and the church was counting. It was 2:58 a.m. when I first heard the click. Not loud, not sharp, just the gentle snick of an old hinge waking from decades of rest. The confessional booth, silent since the moment I stepped into this cursed chapel, was no longer closed. I turned toward it slowly. My breath fogged the air. The wooden door on the right side had swung open about 6 inches, just wide enough to reveal the faint interior. Red velvet, brass trim, and a darkness so thick it seemed to breathe. I didn't need to check the note to remember Rule 6. At 3 a.m., the confessional may open. If it does, sit and listen. Say nothing. Leave when the booth goes silent. 3 minutes early. Of course, this place didn't follow the clock, it bent it. I stood up on legs that didn't feel like mine and stepped into the aisle. The flashlight in my hand had finally given out entirely. No more flickers, just silence and shadow. But the candles on the altar had flared brighter, bathing the confessional in golden light like it had been invited to speak. My steps were slow, careful. The pews on either side felt tighter now, like they'd crept closer while I wasn't watching. The air smelled like wax and old wood. As I reached the booth, the open door creaked just a little wider. It was inviting me. I slid into the right side, closed the door behind me, and sat in the padded seat. The wooden divider between me and the left side had a fine mesh screen. Behind it, nothing but darkness. Then the breathing began. Slow, wet, wrong, not human, not steady. It wasn't inhaling for breath, it was testing the air. I gripped my knees. Do not speak. The breathing shifted. Then a voice, low, male, but cracked and broken like a man dragging his throat across gravel. "Forgive me, Father." I flinched. The voice wasn't beside me. It was inside the booth, not from behind the screen, from the wood itself, like it had been carved into the panels and was now speaking through splinters. The voice quivered. I never meant to open the door. The screen remained empty. No shape, no face, just words. But they told me she was calling for help. They made her sound like my wife. I clenched my jaw. The booth grew colder. The voice went on. I thought I could save her. I thought if I followed the light, if I just stepped beyond the altar. A deep thud echoed from somewhere inside the church. A door slamming, or maybe a tomb closing. The voice stuttered. She wasn't there. It wore her face. It wore her smile. But the eyes. God, the eyes. The candles dimmed. The velvet in the booth pressed in around me, the seat sagging lower like something beneath it was moving. Don't speak. The voice sobbed once. Then, now I'm here. Still confessing. Still waiting. Every night. Every hour. The screen grew darker. Then came a scraping noise, soft and slow, like a fingernail dragging down the inside wall of the booth. I looked straight ahead, heart pounding. "Are you listening, Father?" I didn't answer. I said, "Are you—" The sound stopped. Silence. The temperature shifted again. Back to freezing. The booth seemed to release its grip on me. The air was still. I waited. 5 seconds. 10, maybe 30. Then I stood. The door opened without a sound, and I stepped out into the chapel once more. The candles had returned to normal. No sound from the pews. The confessional door shut softly behind me. Rule 6 complete. But as I turned to return to my pew, I noticed something tucked under my arm. A piece of parchment. Rough, brittle. I hadn't seen it before. I didn't feel it placed, but it was there. And on it, written in the same ink as the rule list, "He confessed." You listened. Now it's your turn. My blood ran cold. I shoved the paper into my coat pocket and staggered back to my seat. The church wasn't just testing me, it was collecting pieces. Of me. Of others. It had been doing this a long time, and I had 2 rules left. By 3:27 a.m., the air inside the chapel had changed again. The silence was no longer passive, it was loaded. Like the walls themselves were waiting for a single wrong move to snap shut around me. I didn't sit anymore. I stood near the center aisle, facing both the altar and the confessional. My hands were shaking. My coat was damp with sweat and candle soot, and the flashlight in my pocket had crumbled into useless metal. But the note was still in my grip, crumpled, frayed, but intact. Only 2 rules remained, and I didn't need to look to remember them. Rule 4. If the stained glass glows blue, do not look at the altar. Cover your eyes until the light fades. Rule 7. Do not stay past sunrise. The church does not like goodbyes. My eyes darted to the stained glass high above the altar. It had been colorless for hours, just dead panes of fractured saints and blank-eyed martyrs. Then it happened. A single flicker. Blue, like lightning caught in water. It glowed for less than a second, but it was enough to kick my heart into a sprint. I turned away immediately, dropping to the floor with a sharp grunt as my knees slammed against the cold stone. My hands flew over my face, pressing my palms into my eye sockets until the pain was the only thing I could focus on. The note had warned me. Don't look at the altar. I didn't. I kept my head down, eyes sealed tight, listening to the hum of the stained glass as the glow intensified. It wasn't just light, it had a sound, a deep melodic chime that rang without a source, like a bell underwater. Then came the whispers, not from the walls, from the altar. Dozens of voices speaking at once, some familiar, some wrong, all calling out to me like a chorus of shattered memories. We saw you. You looked before. Why not now? Your mother forgave us. Your father begged for you. Come closer, Daniel. I pressed my hands harder over my ears, but I could still hear them, inside. Then something shifted in the air. A presence, towering, cold. It stepped down from the altar. I didn't see it, but I felt it. Each step vibrated through the floorboards like something ancient and heavy was crossing the chapel toward me. Thud, thud, thud. It stopped just behind me. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. And then, a hand grazed my shoulder. It didn't touch my skin. It passed through my coat like cold smoke, but the intent was clear. It wanted to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. Seconds passed, maybe longer. The hand withdrew. The hum from the stained glass began to fade, and slowly the glow dimmed. I counted to 10, then 20, then 30. Only then did I open my eyes. The chapel was empty again, but the altar, something had changed. The crucifix was gone. In its place, a long mirror now stood, tall, cracked down the middle, and rimmed in iron thorns. I backed away without blinking. That hadn't been there before, and I hadn't looked. But the church still wanted to show me what was coming next. I checked my watch, 4:12 a.m., less than 2 hours left. I knew sunrise came late this time of year, around 6:01, but I wasn't going to wait at the front door with a minute to spare. I walked toward the narthex at the rear of the chapel, keeping my eyes off the altar and mirror. But just as I reached the vestibule, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The front doors were gone. Not locked, not sealed, gone. In their place, a solid wall of old, cold stone. Seamless. No handle, no hinges, no exit. I turned around, heart hammering, scanning the shadows. That's when I saw it, painted across the door to the confessional in fresh black strokes. Do not leave. You are the sermon now. The room tilted. The candles along the aisle sputtered in perfect unison, and the whispers started again, all at once, but now from every pew, every panel, every grain of wood. They weren't asking me to listen. They were chanting, "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." Over and over, the church had closed in, and it had learned my name. The chapel had swallowed me whole. My name, once just a sound, was now a prayer echoing off every inch of the walls. Daniel, Daniel. They chanted it like a hymn, a warning and a welcome all at once. I pressed my back to the sealed stone where the front doors used to be. My palms ran across the surface, desperate for cracks, hinges, anything that resembled an escape. There was none. The note trembled in my pocket like it was alive. When I pulled it free, something had changed. The final rule, Rule 7, was now underlined in thick, smeared red ink. Do not stay past sunrise. The church does not like goodbyes. But how was I supposed to leave? There were no exits. The pews had shifted again. They lined the center aisle perfectly now, more of them than before. They curved slightly inward like rows of teeth, forming a jagged smile around the altar. And the mirror, the one that had replaced the crucifix, had started to glow. Blue. But this time I couldn't look away. I tried. I tried to blink, to turn my face, to shield my eyes with trembling hands, but the reflection pulled me. My vision tunneled. The world narrowed until all that remained was the mirror's cracked face. And what I saw, it wasn't me. It was a version of me that never left the third pew, a version that answered the voice in the confessional, that spoke to his mother, that approached the girl in white, that broke every rule. His eyes were gone, just smooth sockets filled with writhing ink. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then he smiled and pointed behind me. I spun around, and the congregation had returned. Dozens of figures filled the pews, silent, faceless. Some wore old Sunday best, their mouths slack with stitched-together hymns. Others dripped with candle wax. Some were barely shadows, shaped like people but flowing like smoke. Every head turned toward me. The chanting stopped. The silence was louder than any scream. Then the mirror cracked again, a fresh fracture splintering out like a spider web. The glass pulsed, and something on the other side began to move. Something trapped. Number not trapped. Waiting. The blue glow turned red. The figures rose from the pews in perfect sync. And suddenly, I understood. Sunrise wasn't coming. Not because the world outside was frozen, but because the church had eaten it. Time didn't pass here like it did out there. This place didn't care about clocks or dawn or mercy. It only cared about obedience. The last rule wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. The figures stepped into the aisle, moving forward. Their steps were silent. Their shapes impossible. Faces peeled and flickered like faulty film strips. And behind them, from the mirror, something massive began to emerge. A claw, then a shoulder, then a face with no features at all, just a blank canvas that warped and stretched, mimicking whoever looked at it. It saw me and wore me, mouthless, eyeless, but undeniably me. It stepped from the mirror like it had just been born. The figures parted, making way for it. It raised a hand, and I felt my chest seize. My lungs stopped working. My arms wouldn't respond. I dropped to my knees, and the walls whispered again. But this time, not in warnings. They spoke as one. You stayed too long. The mirror behind the thing shattered into 1,000 shards, each one reflecting a different version of me. Dying, screaming, running, failing. And then, just as my vision blurred and my consciousness frayed, something in my coat vibrated. The pocket watch. I'd forgotten it entirely. I pulled it free with what little strength I had left. The hands were spinning wildly, but not forward, backward. I don't know why I did it, desperation, instinct, maybe both, but I crushed it against the floor. The glass shattered, and with a single jolt, the air ripped open. The mirror exploded. The figures screamed, and the entire chapel tilted like a ship taken on water. Wind roared in my ears, real wind, outside wind, and light, sunlight, blasted through a fresh crack in the wall behind me. I ran. I didn't stop to think. I ran through stone and flame and blood-inked shadows until I found myself tumbling into wet grass beneath a bruised sky. When I looked back, the chapel was gone. Just an overgrown hill and a few sun-bleached stones, and in my hand, the note, still warm, still complete, 7 rules, no ending, just one final line written in a new hand. You survived. But the church remembers. And sometimes, on quiet mornings just before sunrise, I hear organ music in the wind, and the pews in my dreams creak open, one by one.